Good morning, Esther. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Network Capital. Your book, How to Raise Happy and Successful Children, is a foundational book for me as a young parent and many other young parents who are part of Network Capital. It gives us a lot to think about. There are many debates and frameworks in the book that I want to discuss. You don't need much of an introduction. You are an exceptionally accomplished woman whose children have also gone on to build their categories of one. Thank you so very much for writing the book and for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you. It's always wonderful to be appreciated. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, tell us a bit about your growing up years. You go into some detail in the book, but what are some core principles that were established fairly early on that have been part of your operating framework for yourself and your kids throughout?
Well, I would say, during my childhood, probably the most important thing that I learned was that being an independent thinker was not only important, but sort of life saving. You needed, it was great to rely on your parents or to rely on other people in the family or even your friends, but you had to think for yourself. And that is one of the most important things that I think I came up with as a child. And that is what got me very interested in being a number one reader. In those days, of course, there were no phones and no digital devices. And so I just spent a lot of time at the library. And, it was peaceful. And fortunately, it wasn't that far away. It took me about 20 minutes to walk. And then what I tried to do in the book is explain to parents how important it is to give their children a sense of independence and a sense that they could accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish. If it's a small child, building your blocks or playing, riding a bike or learning how to swim, any of those things are important. And so I think it's important to make sure that the child feels that they can accomplish these things without necessarily leaning on you, the parent, too much. That's not to say that they don't lean on you at all. It's just more that they realize that it's within them that they can accomplish it.
Right.
So that is, I think that was probably the number one takeaway from my childhood.
But it was not an easy childhood. For
No,
many people, it could have been a foundational experience. I've read in many places that what happens in your childhood stays with you for your life. But could you give us a glimpse of what growing up in that environment was and how your spirit always maintained that can-do attitude? Where did that zest for life really come from? It would seem, despite the background, unless I'm missing something.
right. No, so I grew up in a difficult childhood. So my parents were immigrants. My mother was born in Russia, Krasnoyarsk, um, and actually, I just realized within the last like month that she probably was born in Vilnius, in Lithuania, and then had a long trip between Vilnius to go to Siberia. It was her father that I think was exiled to Siberia. So she had a difficult time. Also, my father was born in the Ukraine, and so they met in New York City, and and I was the first one born in the United States. And as you can imagine, immigrants don't have a lot of resources. As a matter of fact, they have very few resources. And my father was an artist, and that's even worse than being any other career because no one gets paid for art at all. It's kind of crazy. And so we had no money at all. Um, as I said, oh, I don't know if I said I was born in New York City, but I guess it was just too expensive for them there. So they decided to go to California, where it was less expensive, and more opportunity. But so that was a difficult thing, growing up with nothing. I don't think I ever had anything new except shoes
Mm.
until I was 18. And everything was a hand-me-down, or somebody else had it, or I made it, or something along those lines. And then also um, the tragedy that happened when I was 10, I think really sort of solidified that I needed to be an independent thinker. So my mother, my brother, I have two brothers. One was 5 years younger, and the other was about 8 years younger. And the one that was the youngest, unfortunately, was playing on the floor of the kitchen with a bottle of aspirin. But in those days, they didn't have those special lids on them to protect children. So he opened it, and then he ate a few of those aspirin. And who knows why, because aspirin doesn't taste very good. But, little kids, they don't think. And so my mother, she called the doctor. And unfortunately, we didn't have, we weren't, I would say, high paying patients. And so as a result, I don't think the doctors actually spent much time with her online on the phone. And she asked, like, well, what should I do? Just ate all this aspirin. And he probably wasn't thinking, or maybe didn't hear what she said. I don't know what the problem was. But he said, well, put him to bed and see how he is in a few hours. I mean, which is any logical person would tell you that's not the thing to do. But my mother, being the immigrant, was always afraid to ask questions, especially to people with titles like a doctor,
Mm.
and a man. So she just like, okay, I'll do what you say. And of course, in 3 hours, he was violently ill. And at that point, it was like really almost impossible to save him. But we went to a hospital, a nearby community hospital, where they pumped his stomach, but it was too late, unfortunately. And I mean, it's a long story how they didn't want to accept him in the hospital because we had no proof of payment. There were all kinds of issues, and eventually, tragically, he died. And so that really had a very important impact on my life, because I mean, I was a 10-year-old kid, and I saw what was going on and how terrible it was. And I mean, I wish I would have been smart enough to tell my mother to, take him to the hospital right away. But I wasn't there at the time it happened. Um, but in any event, after that, I decided that I don't care what anyone's title is, I don't care what they do in society. I was going to be an independent thinker, and I wasn't going to be afraid to challenge them. So if my mother just would have challenged that doctor, it would have changed everything. And so from then on, that's basically what I did. I did a lot of reading. I was very involved in making sure that I knew how to take care of different aspects of my life. I mean, I was not very old, but that was also important to me. I think the other thing that happened is that because my parents came from Orthodox Jewish families, um, the role of the woman is just to stay at home and to get married early, like 17, 18 years old, and then have more children. And of course, I didn't want to do that at all. I wanted to have an education. But coming from this family that had no money, and coming from a tradition where girls just get married, they refused to support me in my goal to go to college. So I decided I was just going to do it on my own. And I got a job when I was 14, and I saved up as much as I could. And then, luckily, I got a scholarship, actually multiple scholarships. And that's how I ended up going to UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a very challenging childhood. And then, just even going to Berkeley by yourself with no support, that was challenging too. But I was determined that this was going to work. And so, and then, you know, when ended up being a teacher, which was something that I always wanted to do, was to help other people. I wanted to bring that determination to them, and I wanted them to help raise children that also could do something to make the world better, and that also was something that made them feel like they accomplished something in life. And so that's my goal. That's how I ended up writing the book that you like.
Yeah. And we're going to now cover the core principles of the book. Before just trying to address how did you meet Stan and who will person um, you were at the time?
So I lived at what was called the University Students Cooperative Dormitories because those are the cheapest housing on campus. So the students actually do all the work. You cook the meals, you clean the house, you take care of all the maintenance, everything. And so as a result, you pay half price, literally half price. So I could afford it because, I was busy. I didn't have a lot of money. Also, I was working while I was a student. And so it was very helpful for me. Um, I lived at this dormitory called Sherman Hall, and it was a dormant. It had 50 girls who were residents there. And then one year, the year that I joined, they decided to take in boarders, people that ate there, not just lived there, because it was all very controlled, male students versus female students and so forth. So this was one of the first places on UC Berkeley campus that was integrated, male, men and women. So my husband, Stan, was one of the first people that was a boarder there. And all the boarders were men, which I thought was pretty interesting. And one day when I was cleaning the upstairs, this was a two-story building, um, and we had just removed all these. I was some kind of supplies in a very large box, and you know, I still was kind of. I was only like 17 or 18, and of course, not very sensible in many cases. I said, wow, this is a great box. Well, why don't I just sit in this box and slide down the stairs? It's like skiing, only no snow, just on the stairs. So that's what I did. I sat in this box. The stairway, it was a big staircase, and I started at the top and I went all the way down to the bottom. And then it it landed on the feet of this male student who just happened to be Stan. And it was crazy because he was like, God, what is going on in this dorm? I just signed up to be a boarder here to eat, and now look at this. So, anyway, that's how I met him. Fortunately, he didn't hold it against me. He thought it was pretty funny. So, that's how I met Stan. And then, um, we we became good friends. He was from Poland, so he spoke Polish. And at the time that I met him, I spoke Russian because I was taking Russian in school, and then also my mother and father were from Russia, so I thought I should learn some Russian. So he didn't like Russia, but he was willing to practice Russian with me. So that was another connection. And yeah, I was very grateful for the practice. And so I think I was, anyway, within a year and a half, we got married. So I was just turned 21 when we got married.
It's so fascinating because your daughters, in the introduction to the book, they talk about this incident in describing your vibrant spirit and can-do attitude. It seems like, despite your tumultuous childhood, you managed to retain this zest for life, this sense of possibility, which comes across in various ways throughout the book. Do you have any like reflections or recollections of how that happened? Because for many people, the opposite effect can happen. They hold their childhood experiences as the foundational experiences to shape their adulthood and their subsequent generations.
Um, I don't know where I learned it, but I do think you're right. That I always had this incredible zest for fun and for doing things that were positive in the
Mm.
world. And even when I was, a small child before my brother David died, I was always doing a lot of things that were fun. I spent a lot of time after school, playing on the equipment, playing with my friends, um, and then even when I had, like I say, no clothes, I actually had to make my own clothes. With this, I had bought myself a sewing machine, and it was so much cheaper to make clothing than to buy it in the store. Um, I always thought of that as fun and exciting and creative, and I would make all sorts of unusual things because you have that opportunity when you're making it as opposed to buying it. You can just you know figure out what you want to do. And I guess of my friends, I was kind of the leader of the fun. Um, and I didn't want to let all these negative things impact me in a negative way because they could, without money.
Mm.
Um, and I kept that up. I was lucky to have this positive attitude that you can do it if you really try hard enough. And and I and it stuck with me forever. And then I also passed it on to my children. And you know, actually I passed it on to my students. I had thousands of students over the years, and I was always seen as the super fun teacher, because I would do innovative, crazy things in class, and they kids all loved it, and then they talked about it, and so then of course my classes became very popular because everybody wanted to be in class. If you're going to have to take English, you might as well take English with a fun teacher as opposed to a teacher that makes it miserable for you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can tell you a lot of crazy things that I did.
I would love to hear them. But I think students joined your classes because of a lot of the fun. But the fun to excellence ratio seems to be very high, both in your household, as you raised three exceptional daughters, and in the thousands of students you taught and mentored. How did you balance that? And where fundamentally does your approach differ from, say, Amy Chua when she talks about tiger parenting, which is a lot about control and driving excellence? Yours seems to be a different approach. Can you explain that a bit?
Right. So my approach is opposite from Amy Chua because with those children, it's the tiger mother. Um, she is in charge of telling the child what to do all the time. And my approach is the opposite in that I want the child to come up with their own control and come up with their own ideas and do things that they think are important. And if they don't do it correctly, to revise over and over again until they do it right. And I was, had this built in that you want to know the most you can based on that tragic death of my brother. You want to be independent thinker, but you also want to have a good time while you're doing it. And
Mhm.
so in my program, in my classes, I gave students an opportunity to be the leader, to actually, because typically the teacher takes over the class and leads everything and does the whole class for, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours, however long the program is. Um, so I taught students how to be the leaders in the class. And that made a huge difference because they learned a lot about how to be a leader and they got to practice it. And so the combination of being independent, being a leader, thinking for yourself, and then producing products that ranked number one in the United States. I mean, the magazines, the newspapers, all the things that my students produced, they didn't go, their quality wasn't lower because I gave them control. It went up.
Mm.
And so, that also contributed to everything that was happening. That's what drew so many hundreds of kids to the program because they could have fun, they could learn a lot, they could be independent, they could feel good about themselves. And the bonus was they got into usually the college of their choice because I
Mm.
wrote all their recommendations. And, that took me forever, by the way, to write all the, I was like writing hundreds of recommendations every year. And they always were due just after Thanksgiving. I'll never forget that because I used to have these giant piles that were like 3 feet tall of recommendations. And my husband would say, "Are you going to be able to do this before or after Thanksgiving? And what about our turkey?" And so it's like, well, I don't know. And there were all these people in the house and cranberries and turkey and whatever. So I never forget the recommendation writing. Um, but I do think that it was something that I focused on was the you can do it. No matter what it is, no matter what your background is, I'm sorry that you've had a bad childhood experience, but don't dwell on it. Don't, if your parents didn't do what you wanted them to do, so now you're old enough, you're 13, 14, you can do it yourself and don't carry a grudge. Don't be angry at them. They did the best they could considering their circumstances. And I think that really helped a lot of kids. And also my classes were so big because the enrollment was off the charts. I had between 50 and 70 kids in every class. And I could do it because I gave the kids so much responsibility for for doing whatever the curriculum required. Um, and you can't believe it. You give kids responsibility and have them do the work, they love it because they feel respected, trusted, respected. That's where I came up with my trick philosophy because you trust them, you respect them, you give them independence, you collaborate with them instead of dictating, and you're always treating them with kindness. Honestly, they always could come to me with whatever problem they had. I could help them solve it, whatever it was. And sometimes, of course, they were naughty. They did things that shouldn't have done. I also had a method of dealing with that, but I don't remember once in all the years I taught, I never sent a kid to the office. I always did whatever problem they had, we solved it ourselves.
Exactly. Except the one time where you had to, because they had consumed illegal substances or something, which is required. And then you explained it to them. So it seems like you did strike that balance of independence to the maximum possible level, and your students delivered.
That's right. They all delivered. I mean, I'm in touch with many of them today, which is kind of funny because now they have their own kids. And many of them are 40 and 50 years old. It's like, oh my God, really? You're that old? But, they're human beings. So, of course, you still connect. It's wonderful. I feel
Absolutely.
blessed. to have so many former students in touch with me.
And they've gone on to do such extraordinary things, both, I mean, of course, your daughters, but also your students. A
That's
quick
right.
question back to Stan. Would it be fair to say that Stan was a wonderful husband, a wonderful father, but because of his travel, he was not able to be as involved in raising the girls early on? Is it fair or no?
That's fair to say. Yeah. So I also had to support him in all his efforts because he was a professor of physics at Stanford, and he started out as a assistant professor, then was became associate, and then eventually became chairman of the physics department. And he traveled a lot for work, and he had to publish a lot of papers. He was very had a lot of work to do. And so he couldn't spend as much time as he would have liked to at home. So I think it's important if your partner can't do everything you want them to do to support them and then teach the children also that they have to be a support and not be angry because the parent can't be here when you want them to be here. Um, I mean, I think that happens a lot in today's world because both parents have to work. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
And so you have to navigate whatever it is that life gives you without a lot of animosity and a lot of fighting. It's just you've just got to do it. Figure out how to do it in ways that are supportive. Yes, he did not participate as much as he would have liked to because of all the travel that was involved. But he was did a great job with the time that he had. Every night after dinner, he also had time then, so he played games with the girls. And as a matter of fact, they became great game players. Chess, checkers, Risk, all these board games. They all played a lot of games, and he relaxed and enjoyed it at that time, and then that gave him a special time to work with and spend time with the girls.
When did you realize that your girls were gifted or like they had this extraordinary talent? Because many students do well. Many parents see their kids get good grades and demonstrate sparks of excellence, perhaps more. But there's something really special going on in your household, which piques the curiosity of almost anybody.
So Susan was just an ordinary little girl. If anything, she even had a few issues, a few problems. So it took her a long time to learn to speak. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something the matter. And so I finally took her in to be evaluated because she wasn't talking very much. And I couldn't understand her. And so it turns out that she was ambidextrous.
Mm.
That means that you use both hands equally well. And in order for speech to come in clearly, the child has to pick one hand, and then that has to be a dominant hand. I never heard of this, of course.
Mm.
Um, but then when I realized it, it was like, yeah, she can, do use both hands for everything. Um, so she had to pick one hand. She picked her left hand. So she had to do exercises, hopping on her left foot, eating with her left hand, all this stuff. Honestly, it was amazing because within, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, all of a sudden she was perfectly clear. And it was like, God, they really knew what they were doing at this place, speech therapy place. I was like, thank you. Um, but you know, as a first grader, second grader, she was always one of these kids. She was an observer before she participated, um, as opposed to one of the kids that jumps in and just does it. And she was always great to be with, a very good, fun child to have. She was very sensible and logical early on. Maybe that was a result of my teaching. I don't know, but it was fun to have her as my oldest daughter. Uh, the other kids, you know, I just wanted my daughters to be independent thinkers. I had just one goal for them. That was it. The one goal, independent thinkers. And that was what I succeeded in having them do. Um, when Susan was 5, we moved to Switzerland, and she went to the United Nations school, and she met lots of other kids there. And one of the families that invited her to spend some time with them was a French family that spoke primarily French and with some English. And they invited her to go to the mountains with them, to the Alps, for a week when she was 5 years old. Now, what 5-year-old would go? You just have to ask yourself. Most 5-year-olds aren't interested at all, and they probably would not go. They'd want to stay with their mom. Susan said yes, and she went with them for a week. Okay, this is a new country, new language, new everything. So she already had within her this ability to think independently, and that she would do whatever was required. And she had a great time. And to this day, even now, we know this girl, who of course now is a mother and actually a grandmother. That's that's how long we've known her. She's great. She lives in the French in Fontainebleau in the French in France.
I used to live in Fontainebleau as well for a bit.
Oh,
It's a wonderful
that
place.
it's a great place. Yeah,
Yeah. So, so independent thinking became the foundation of their respective careers. How did you
right.
resist the urge of not projecting your aspirations to her, or you and your husband's aspirations on her?
Well, we did project one aspiration, both of us, and that was education. We wanted them to learn as much as they could and to do well in school. We didn't have a lot of pressure on them to get good grades. We just wanted them to feel good about the courses. None of them had a 4.0 grade average. They all had 3.8, 3.9, 3 point something, but no, if they got a B, it was like, that's okay. If got a C, whatever, maybe should have tried a little harder. Um, but in spite of that, the fact that they did not get 4.0 grade average, um, Susan managed to get into Harvard. We were a little shocked. Uh, and but we wanted her to go to Berkeley because we went to Berkeley, right? So, and Berkeley was about 1/4 the price of Harvard. And was like, oh, we can even give you extra money if you go to Berkeley. There's a lot of reasons why you want to go to Berkeley. She's like, nope, I want to go to Harvard. Anyway, like I said, we could not believe that she got in because we did not help her at all, and not help with the essays, nothing. I said, if you're going to Harvard, you have to do it yourself. Then she did it herself. And then Janet, not to be out of outdone by Susan, of course, did the same thing, only she went to Stanford. She couldn't go to Harvard because Susan was already there. And it's like a big school, Janet. I said, you could go if you want. Anyway, and then Anne, who didn't want to do what either one of her older sisters did, went to Yale. It's like, okay, if that makes you happy, that's good. So they all like their schools. They all are very happy they went to their schools.
But Anne did give you a bit of a shocker after Yale. She did really well studying biology, but you didn't seem to mind too much, or maybe you could want to correct me, when she wanted to become a babysitter.
Oh, She graduated from Yale. You know how much money that costs. It's a lot of money. And then she came home. She majored in molecular biophysics. Okay, not a bad major. She came home and I was like, okay, now what do you want to do? Ah, I want to babysit. What? After no job, nothing, no idea of what she wanted to do. And so I was like, okay. Anyway, this went on, I'm not kidding, for months. She put up a little advertisement at our local swim club, babysitter available. And she got a lot of people that were interested, especially a Yale graduate, right? And so she found one family. She really liked them, and they had a newborn, and she babysat for months. And I thought to myself, oh my God, you know, all this money we spent on on college, and she wants to be a babysitter. I said, maybe you should have thought about that before. Anyway, I didn't push on it too much. The only thing I did do is I suggested that she go to this job fair. They used to have job fairs. They don't do that anymore. That was nearby in Santa Clara. And I said, why don't you just go down there and see if there's anything interesting? After all, why not? And the big lure was they have a lot of nice food. So she went and she came back and she said, I didn't find anything. Nothing. It's like, really? Well, I met this one man, but that's all. I'm going to go back to my babysitting. It's like, okay, all right, whatever. Anyway, this one man that she met there called her. This was all phones, right? There was no other way to communicate. Called her and invited her to come to New York and be interviewed. And the big excitement for Anne is she got a free trip to New York and she got to stay at the Helmsley Hotel. And this was a very beautiful hotel. So she went because of the hotel. Could not believe it. Anyway, she interviewed with this guy. Turns out it was called Investor International, which is a Swedish investment firm. And they liked her and they hired her. And that's how she got the job. And it was the first thing was she was head of a biotech investment company and firm or investment group, I guess it was. It was pretty amazing. And she loved it. She loved working for them. She's still good friends with all those people, from Sweden. She loves Sweden. It worked out to be a perfect experience.
It sure did. So now your children have gone to college. They've obviously gone to exceptional places. They made some career choices, etc. Um, I want to talk about two phases. One is just after they started, like Susan decided to join Google. Um, were you involved in these kind of decisions? Did she brainstorm with you, or did you want to be involved in such decisions? What was it like?
Well, they did talk to me about it. Like Susan talked to me about it. Um, it was exciting, to have someone rent her garage and then pay for the mortgage. That was exciting. Um, she did talk to me about it and talk to my husband about it. She was working at Intel. Should I stay at Intel or should I join this crazy startup that's in my garage? There was a lot of discussion. Um, the same thing with Janet. We always openly talked about options. And they asked me, I think they really valued my husband's opinions on all of this, and they talked to everybody in the family, including my husband's mother, Janina, who was a librarian for the Library of Congress, and she lived in Washington D.C. But so we were a very supportive, open family.
Mm,
So it didn't whatever they wanted to do was okay as long as they wanted to do it. I
yeah.
think that was the key, you know. And the part of the reason Susan joined Google is she disliked intensely her job at Intel. And so after a while, it was just like, okay, if this is you don't like it, why not try something new? And then they gave her a lot of responsibility, and that made her excited, you know. She was, I mean, when Susan first joined Google, she was employee number 16. And the thing that is crazy is they asked her, we need to make money and we know how to find information on the web, but we have no clue on how we're supposed to make money. That's it. So you have to come up with some plan to make money. Can you imagine that? That was her goal. That was her role. And the second thing she had to do was she was in charge of the real estate. Your garage is too small. We have too many people now. We need to find a new place. And so that was two dual role, make money and find a place for us to stay.
Especially since the founders of Google ate all her food at night while they were renting.
Well, that's right. Well, that was a third thing, you know, and you always wonder about all those micro kitchens at Google where you can get food 24 hours a day. And I think a lot of that came from their experience with Susan at her garage because they always needed to have food 24 hours a day. They never went home. I don't think that when she was when she worked with them, when she first interviewed them, I don't think they said that they were going to be there 24 hours a day. I think she thought it was like from 8 to 5.
Clearly not. Um, a follow-up question on this. Um, I've heard this term immigrant mindset, which is risk averse. Let's be sure. Let's avoid taking too many undue risks. You were an immigrant. You did not grow up with too many privileges. I think your husband was also an immigrant. Um,
Right.
how did you overcome this mindset at all, or was that not a fear, or did you achieve success at a certain time where you felt that you had minimized your downside? Just walk me through that.
Well, you know, the main thing that we wanted to be careful of is that we had enough money for food and shelter, because that was a challenge for me growing up. You know, some of the places that we lived, I don't think you would want to live. And there was also not enough food. So I think the main focus was we can take a risk as long as we have some reserve to make sure that we have a place to live and enough food to eat. I know it sounds crazy now considering my situation where I am today, but that was our main focus. And so and I think with my daughters also, I wanted to make it really clear to them that they should always protect wherever it is they're living and make sure they have enough resources for food. You can take a risk provided you don't jeopardize where you're living. And so that's I think what I did and what they did. Um, I mean, it was really important for me to always feel that I had a home, especially since there were situations when I was a child when that was not always clear that we were going to have a place to live. And I think the immigrant mindset, I think one of the best part of the immigrant mindset is that people are incredibly innovative and creative. When you don't have a lot of money, you become incredibly creative. And that's one of the blessings, I think, of being an immigrant. And and so, you know, needless to say, I'm not very disappointed. I'm just it's tragic what we're doing to immigrants today in the United States.
Yep.
I mean, we're losing all our creativity and our creative minds. If I just look at like the head of Google today, Sundar Pichai was an immigrant from India who did not grow up in a luxurious lifestyle. And if I look at Saul Khan, and I mean, there's so many heads of,
Canadella, yeah.
that's right,
But yeah,
Microsoft also.
yeah, I used to work there, so there were people from so many countries who work in Google and Microsoft. It's difficult to understand who's you know what's the nationality, dominant nationality in places like that. It's a shared mission, and people come from everywhere.
That's right. And they are the heart of America. They're the reason that America succeeded as well as it did is the immigrants. And, Microsoft is an example, Google's an example, even Facebook. They're all examples of this. And, whatever we can do to make this country understand the power of the immigrant mindset is what I would like to do. I mean, I can hardly talk about it because I'm so upset at what happened. Is what, yeah. Anyway,
But yeah,
yes,
thank you very much for sharing this point of view. Your daughters started becoming public figures, and I would say extraordinarily successful, even before like they become like household names. Um, how did you, or what did they do to be grounded? How did you contribute to that? Or that was not a conversation at all? Because today they're all regarded as public intellectual public figures of extraordinary contribution to three distinct fields. And I think you, as the mother, are probably the most successful mother that one can think of, not because of what they achieved, but because of the values that instilled in them to enable them to figure things out on their own.
well, there is no clear path in life. Nobody has a crystal ball. And so it's really important for you to be able to think your way through anything that you can are confronted with. And that is my main message to my students and to my children and to my grandchildren. And, believing in yourself is probably the most important thing that you can do. And that's what I tried to get across in my classes. That's what I'm trying to get across. I have a new app called Parenting Trick. It's on
Yeah.
both Android and Apple Store. And what I'm trying to do is help parents understand how to parent so that they can bring up children that believe in themselves. And and it's my goal is to try to help everybody, all the young parents worldwide, because it doesn't depend on your skin color or your language or your, religion or anything. We're all human beings. And every single human being wants to be an independent thinker. But it's crushed usually by the school system, unfortunately, and then also by cultural issues where the parents want to be in control or where the school system wants to tell you what to do all the time. And I'm working to try to change at least 20% of the school system so that kids can be independent thinkers. That will actually hopefully save our planet because we have so many issues facing the planet. You know, climate change is one of the number one problems. And I think there are countries in the world that are doing a great job. And I think China is one of them. And, they really are doing a great job with electrical resources as opposed to other resources. Anyway, there's a lot of countries in the world, all of Europe, even India, that are working on climate issues, and I would like to support that. And I think that the immigrant mentality can help develop resources, ways for us to deal with the climate change. I mean, I think you've probably read about the tragedy that happened in Texas
Yes.
I mean, it's hard for me to even think about it. It's so tragic. And then, even in New York City recently, there was a flood, and there's problems worldwide, and we need to work together as a planet, solve these problems. And
Yep.
I don't know what it's going to take to have that happen, but the sooner it happens, the better.
Absolutely. Just shifting gears, I think
Mhm.
grief and loss have been part of your life from the beginning, but there have been more recent instances. I don't want to ask you any specific question on that. I just wanted to get your reflections on coping mechanisms, or how did you reconcile with it? How do you deal with it?
Well, it's been very difficult. It hasn't even been a year since my daughter Susan passed away from non-small cell lung cancer. Um, and what we're doing as a family to try to make ourselves better able to cope with it is to do something positive for the world in her name and to carry on her legacy. And she developed a kind of cancer that unfortunately today is very common in women. Apparently, more women, young women, die from non small cell lung cancer than die from prostate cancer, not prostate, um, colon cancer, and breast cancer combined. So, more women are dying from this than breast cancer. So the question is, why are so few research dollars going into the study of non-small cell lung cancer? So we're trying to rectify that. We set up a foundation in Susan's name. It'll be a non-small cell lung cancer foundation doing research and seeing what we can do to help make sure that other people don't face this dire prediction. And then my grandson died from unfortunately an overdose, but it was an overdose of a prescription pill. It was not a illegal drug pill. And the overdose was, how can we help young people cope with all the stress that they face in life? And there's just more stress today than ever because a lot of the stress is coming from our technical devices, computers, cell phones, all that stuff. So, how can we help that? So, my two granddaughters, Zoe and Tanya, set up a foundation in his honor called Marco's Mission. And Marco's Mission, the goal is to help young people cope more effectively with the pressures that they face and with anxiety and depression. And there's a lot more anxiety and depression in today's world than there has been ever before. And in the US, unfortunately, the solution is a pharmaceutical solution, which we are against. Because I think when you take these pharmaceuticals, pills, repeatedly, you can somehow take too much of the wrong thing, which is what happened to Marco. He just took too much of a prescription pill by accident. It was an accidental overdose. And we don't want that to happen to any other children or any other teenagers, anybody else at all. So my two granddaughters are going around to local schools giving talks, which seem to be very effective because it's peer to peer talk, and so that's what we're doing to help the world and to make ourselves feel better, like we're doing something to prevent this from happening to other people.
I'm confident that Susan's legacy will go on much beyond tech, but glad to see what you're doing as a family. Thank you for sharing. I know it was not easy to do so. I know we're about time, just a couple of more minutes. Um, can you take the trick framework that you've developed and help us answer through these questions, like devices or no devices? dealing with things like climate change, artificial intelligence, and its negative and positive impacts. How should we frame these problems that are shared anxieties among parents today and students using perhaps the trick framework?
Well, I think one of the most straightforward answers to that question is, instead of trying to control your children, help them understand the problem. So when they understand what it is that is a problem, too much screen time, too much influence of other or drugs on their life or alcohol or whatever, you need to not just control them, which the school tries to do and which a lot of parents try to do. You need them to understand the situation and then build in mechanisms for them to self control. Because when they are no longer in your sphere of influence, you want them to be able to control their own lives. And unless they have practice controlling themselves and their own lives and their own anxieties, they won't be able to do it easily as adults. And you can't just jump off and start doing it. You have to practice doing it. It's just like, riding a bike. You can't just watch somebody ride a bike and then jump on and do it. You have to practice riding a bike. You have to practice swimming. You have to practice driving a car. You can't do any of these by just watching someone else do it. And so, and you can't give them the responsibility for taking care of themselves if you don't ease into it by teaching them slowly as they're children and get to be teenagers how to protect themselves on social media, how to protect themselves from the adverse effects of too much drinking. And I wouldn't be such a strong advocate for this other than I've had all this experience in my classes dealing with teenagers. And I realized that if you explain the reasoning behind it, they understand and then they can do the same thing and take over. So I know that that sounds like people say, well, my kid, she just doesn't know my kid. My kid is terrible. My theory is that all kids want independence and want to be able to take care of themselves. And you want to teach them and give them the opportunity to do that.
And I just want to conclude today's really insightful discussion with this Philip Larkin poem called This Be the Verse. I'm going to read it out to you, and you can conclude with remarks however you like. So, this is Philip Larkin, This Be the Verse. They fuck you up, mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old style hats and coats, who half time was soppy stern and half at another's throats. Um,
This poem is true. I'm sorry to say. And so it's important for the young people who have been fucked up by their parents not to carry all this hatred and grief with them because it impacts them badly, but to do what they can to forgive those parents and try not to perpetuate that with their own children. Because one of the most difficult things is to avoid parenting the way you were parented. You might say to yourself, I'm never going to do that to my kids. And then you end up doing it. So you have to make it really on the conscious level. And you need to, it's very important for you not to carry all this anger with you, not to carry all those negative tapes with you that go through your mind when you think about your parents. It's bothering and hurting you personally. And so I can speak from experience because my father was not a good father. And I just had to forgive him for all the bad things that he did and never want to follow in his footsteps ever. And I forgive him because he was also treated that way by his father. And it just goes down from generation to generation, and it's so hurtful. So you have to take good care of yourself, and that includes not carrying all those grudges and all that anger.
Thank you so very much, Esther, for doing what you do, for writing the book, and for raising three incredible women who've shaped history and will continue to do so. I'm very grateful for your time, and I look forward to your app. I will be the first one to check it out today.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for the interview, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share it with so many people.
I appreciate your time. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.